I would say that I was definitely born an artist and a musician. And I think artists are born, not sort of created. Ever since I was like a little kid, I was aware of this sort of presence, this substratum in the background of everything, but I didn't know what it was. And it began to come into focus when I started to play piano by ear, and I wondered where all the music was coming from. You know, I didn't read music. And that was the first of two questions that I asked at a very young age and have continued throughout my life. The second one was, what am I doing here? This planet Earth just didn't seem like my home. I felt very out of place here. Nothing seemed real. So as I got into school, I remember asking a science teacher, you know, how did all of this start? And he said, well, it started with the Big Bang. And I said, okay, but what started the Big Bang? And he said, nothing. I said, nothing. It just went bang? And he said, yeah. And I thought that was ridiculous. Nothing just goes bang, you know? Now, 2 years ago, science is now saying that actually this whole thing didn't start with the Big Bang. There was something before that. They're not quite sure what. So the science teacher said, you know, I think what you're asking is more of a religious question. So I, asked some people who were into religion, and they said, well, this is what happened. God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and on the seventh day, he rested. And I said, why? He's God. Does he need a nap? And of course, that didn't go over very well either. So I got kind of kicked down the road to spirituality, which was what was left. And what I found was amazing, because a lot of the spiritual masters, like Jesus and Buddha, they were all singing the same song. Everything is consciousness, everything is one energy, awareness. And it was just fascinating how I began to understand how spirituality and science actually do come together, because quantum physics agrees with what these spiritual masters have said from many, many years ago. So where the dulcimer comes in is I was about probably close to 14 when I first saw one played by a young lady named Ann Stokes. And she was involved with this Sufi teacher named Baba Mahayadeen. And because I was so curious about the dulcimer and I didn't know any other players, and curious about Ann, I followed her to this Sufi teacher. And that's where my kind of formal spiritual training began. And I have to laugh because I can see now that the dulcimer and meeting Ann was a cosmic setup for the answers to this entire journey as an artist. And I think all artists are spiritual to one degree or another, because we're all curious about the muse.
You've been described as an out-of-the-box dulcimer player and artist. Is that description fair?
I think so. I've always kind of done my own thing on the dulcimer, and same with painting. And I tend to live my life out of the box. I try and live a life that's very fluid, authentic. And even the dulcimer that I buy and the builders that I choose to create them are pretty much out of the box folks. So a pretty unique collection of those.
You became well known as a dulcimer player and singer when you were quite young. When did you first see a dulcimer?
Well, the very first dulcimer I saw was in 1972 at a meditation gathering. I went there with a friend who played guitar to make some music. And there was a girl there named Ann Stokes, and she was playing the dulcimer. I'd never seen one, and I thought it was just absolutely beautiful. It was made by David Field. And I just knew from the moment I saw it that this was going to be my magic carpet ride through life. I don't know how I knew. And about a week or two later, I happened to find one in a local bookstore, and I bought it and I brought it home. And because I'd been playing piano by ear for quite a number of years, I started to just play, the songs I was playing on the piano. Peter, Paul, and Mary, Sergio Mendes, little Judy Collins, a little this, a little that, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I developed my own style. So it was not at all a traditional way of playing the dulcimer, and I really wasn't part of any folk circles. I didn't know any other dulcimer players and didn't play much. So I just kind of did my own thing with it. It was a canvas to paint on. And it was that innovative approach that got me signed to Folkway Records. And Folkways was a big label because they had people like Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie. They had dulcimer players, but I wasn't aware of them at the time. A few months before I made my first album, which is called Kevin Roth Sings and Plays Dulcimer, I heard a couple Dulcimer albums that Folkways had, and one of the players was Jean Ritchie, and I recorded her song, The L&N Don't Stop Here Anymore. And that kind of got me going in the Dulcimer world because I caught the boom in the 70s. And my album was one of the few that you could buy. So that, along with this innovative approach, kind of launched a career for me. I got in trouble a lot with the folk police because I wasn't playing traditional dulcimer. But that was okay with me. You know, I stayed an original.
After Folkways, you began to record children and family music and ended up singing the theme song to PBS Television's Shining Time Station. Mm-hmm. What a game changer that must have been for you.
Oh, totally. You know, I was kind of making a living as a dulcimer player, but I found out that there was a market for children's family music, so I kind of dove into that and did pretty well with it. And then one day, I got a call from a guy named Rick Sigelko, who was a producer at PBS in New York, and he was putting together this show based on Thomas the Tank Engine called Shining Time Station. So Rick had been putting his daughter to bed with my lullaby album, Lullabies for Little Dreamers, every night, and he loved my voice, and he wanted me to sing the theme. So I jumped at the chance because the show was going to star Ringo of the Beatles, and later it was George Carlin, and so I went into New York and I recorded the song, and I also wrote some music videos for the show. And when it first came out on PBS, it went zoom. I mean, it was up there with Sesame Street. So suddenly, millions of people were hearing me sing. So at that point, I could call any concert hall and say, do you want to book a family kids show? I'm the singer of Shining Time Station. And I was booked. And I went from making a couple $100 as a folkie to making really good money playing these beautiful concert halls. So I started my own record label and publishing and licensing and all that stuff, and I did really, really well, and kept making records. And Shining Time Station is bigger now almost as a cult kind of a thing, big cult following, and it was just a really lucky run, and it's such a sweet show. It's really very grateful that I had a chance to be part of it. And when I created the music videos, I had a chance to kind of overdub a whole bunch of different kinds of dulcimers. So that was pretty fun.
In your book, Between the Notes, that after all the success, you were still searching for happiness.
Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with my still searching for the answers to the questions I had as a kid. What am I doing here? What's this all about? And success comes at a price. The music and the art business are very difficult businesses to make a living in, especially these days when people are downloading a lot of music, and places like Spotify, they don't pay artists well. But even back then, I was doing really well. I was managing myself, I was booking myself, I was writing the music, I was doing the concerts, and it all was very, very stressful. And along with stress, for me, back then came overeating. I used to be an emotional eater, so I would stuff down my feelings. And as science tells you, stress and inflammation cause illness. And I had a major health crisis, which ended up being a spiritual wake-up call. I came down with stage 3 melanoma cancer, and I was told I had about 2 years to live, and that was like over a decade ago, and it never came back. But I had to do a deep dive and ask myself what mattered, because if I kept going the way I was going, I was gonna, kill myself with the stress and everything. So the answers were very clear. It was music, it was my dog Bosco, the Dulcimers, and painting. And I wanted to live back out in San Diego, California, and have a life sort of like a bohemian. So I figured out a game plan. I envisioned it, I felt it, and as they say, I manifested it. And I moved back to San Diego, and I'm happy, healthy, and I never looked back. And then when I got here, the answers to the spiritual questions became very clear, and it's been a fun ride ever since.
You're also a painter.
Yeah, I do a lot of painting.
Can you tell me about your artwork?
Well, I do mostly abstracts, and I sell to collectors. And then when I do a new album, I usually paint the cover of it, So I go through periods. Joni Mitchell calls it like crop rotation, where I'll paint and then I'll do music. And sometimes when I paint, the music comes all at the same time. So it's a different kind of expression, but I really love it. I usually work with acrylics because they dry fast.
You recorded a unique trilogy of albums.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about them?
Well, it started out with an album called Awakenings, which was a singer-songwriter kind of soul-searching record. And I overdubbed a lot of Dulcimers on it. And about a year after Awakenings came out, I got a phone call from Noel Paul Stuckey, who's Paul of Peter, Paul, and Mary, who's a dear friend of mine and a mentor. And he had been listening to Awakenings, and he said, "Oh man, we got to do something with this album." I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And he said, "Let's take a couple songs off Awakenings, and I want you to write a bunch of new songs, and let's do the album with Dulcimer, synthesizer, and voice." And that was totally unique. I'd never done an album like that before. I wasn't sure that I could write a whole album, but once I started it, man, all these songs just flowed like a river. So I sent them to Noel, and he tweaked them a little bit, and then I recorded them and sent them up to him. And he and Michael McGinnis, who played synthesizer and an amazing arranger, came up with these beautiful arrangements with the Dulcimer and the voice. So the album was called Reawakenings, which was perfect because that's exactly what I was going through at that time. I was reawakening to my own kind of spiritual experience. And it ended up winning an award in Europe. And a few years later, he picked a couple songs off Reawakening and put them on a sampler CD from his label that ended up charting. So that was pretty nice. And after Reawakenings, I moved to San Diego, and I just started to write songs that were upbeat and quirky and fun, because that's how I was feeling. I was sort of past the inquisitive phase, and I thought I really should put this out on an album. So I recorded a record which I called the Deviant Dulcimerist. And there were one or two ballads on there sort of connecting when I lived in Kansas and I drove from there to San Diego and leaving all of that stuff behind. But such a fun record, such a fun record. And so that was the trilogy, the beginning of the search, the answers to the questions, and hey, it's fun time.
You teach Dulcimeditation. Tell me about that.
Well, when I came out to California and I finished recording The Deviant Dulcimerist, a friend of mine asked me, what are you going to do next? And I didn't really know. And he said, why don't you teach people what you did to get out of the dark night of the soul, become like a life coach? I had no idea what a life coach was, but I contacted one, and he was very successful, and we were talking about it. And he said, you're more of a teacher. And I said, well, if I get into all of this stuff, it's going to put the kibosh on the Dulcimer. And he said, no, man, you're getting it all wrong. He said, what you do on the Dulcimer is very meditative. It's like Dulcimeditation. And then the light bulb went off in my head, and I went, and I realized that I had been actually doing Dulcimeditation my entire life without realizing it, playing the Dulcimer very simply while listening to my inner voice. So I thought, well, could I combine what I did to become happier with Dulcimeditation and teach this to people who felt stressed out or stuck or wondered what their purpose in life was and all that kind of stuff in my own kind of style. And I put the word out on some of the Dulcimer Facebook groups, and I got a whole bunch of people interested, and I began to teach them. I didn't know if I'd be very good at it, but as it turned out, their lives improved very quickly, and I just fell in love with the whole process. So now I still teach. It's kind of like a spiritual science and practical way of living. And sometimes I go out and I do that and give concerts and residencies, and that's what Dulcimeditation is. And I developed a dulcimer called the Wink, which is very beautiful, that people play while they do the Dulcimeditation.
You've been through a lot of dulcimers over the years.
Yeah.
How many do you have?
Well, here I must have about 12 or 15 of them. They're all hanging all over the place. But, I've been doing this for 50 years, so there have been a lot of dulcimers. Most of them have been rehomed in a dulcimer museum in Sharonville, Ohio. They actually have a Kevin Roth collection. And that's sort of, I guess, a long wall full of my dulcimers and press clippings and things like that. And I keep thinking I'm done, but I'm never done. I'm a dulcimer junkie. One year I was performing at the Florida Folk Festival, and I went up to the craft area, and there was a luthier named Ken Miller, and he had all these beautiful guitars and mandolins, and on his table was this instrument called a Weissenborn guitar, and I'd never seen one before, but it kind of looked to me like a fat dulcimer. So I asked him, can you take a Weissenborn guitar and turn it into a dulcimer, like a guitarcimer? And he did a prototype, which is great, and then he built this beautiful instrument. His wife, Virginia, did the inlays. And I recently wrote a new song called Moody Little Artist, which I sent to Noel Stuckey, and he added his 2 cents, and I just finished recording it for an upcoming album. It's a lot of fun. So here's Moody Little Artist. She's a moody little artist. She never answers the phone. And most of the time, she likes just being left alone. She stays up all night and she sleeps all day. She never really has a whole lot to say. But she's got this smile. She's got a look I can't resist. And she knows how to work me when she lays on that kiss. Well, she smokes all day and she drinks too much wine. She can rip your heart out when she plays with your mind. She looks like Betty Davis and she acts like a queen. She's never really into anybody's scene, but she's got this smile. She's got a look I can't resist, and she knows how to work me when she lays on that kiss. Well, she left me a moody little painting, a dirty laundry sitting in a pile. I love those kisses, but what I really miss is that manipulative style. Well, one night we made love, and the next day she was gone. I never did find out what went wrong. I heard she left town for good, someone did say, and I can't stop thinking about her every day. I try to forget her, I try to move on, but I just don't know where my heart belongs. 'Cause she's got this smile, she's got a look I can't resist, and she knows how to work me when she lays on that kiss. Yeah, she was a moody little artist that my heart can't quit. She's like a leaky little faucet that just drips and drips and drips. So this is what a old-time dulcimer looks like and sounds like. This was built by a guy named Jethro Amburgy, who I think it was in 1962, and he got his design for this mountain dulcimer from J. Edward Thomas, known as Uncle Eddie. He was one of the oldest builders of dulcimers. And if you look here, the frets are made out of fence staples, and you can only kind of fret it here. You can't do any chords. And it's all walnut, and these friction pegs are hand carved. And it's glued together, but also up here, he's nailed it to the peg head, and also down here, it's nailed a bit. And this is what the mountain dulcimer sounded like a long time ago. I don't have a goose quill, but I do have a noter. It was normally played with a goose quill, but this has got a great little sound. And even when you finger pick it, it's really beautiful. And what's very special to me about this dulcimer is I originally bought my first dulcimer in a bookstore, and the woman who owned that bookstore passed away, and she had gotten this Amburgy dulcimer. She bought it out of the back of Yankee magazine, I think for like $35. And when she died, her family just gave this to me, so it's got a lot of sentimental value to me. And it's just really, really beautiful. It shows you that in all of the fancy dulcimers that I have and the innovative designs, simple, 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 and so beautiful. Jethro Amburgy. While I was at Sunset Cliffs one day, listening to the ocean kind of crash up against the cliffs and go back out, which I said, sounded very musical to me, I went home and I started to compose on a baritone dulcimer that Jerry Rockwell had made, the sounds of what I had experienced. And then I began to think, well, it's so peaceful there, and it's also peaceful up in Idlewild Mountains. So how would I kind of musically orchestrate that drive and then hiking? And so I came up with this for the cliffs. And then this for the drive up the mountain, and then wrote some very kind of meditative parts for the hike along the cliffs, and then parts to drive back down to, from the mountains down to Sunset Cliffs. And I really liked it, and then I called Jerry and I said, would you build me another baritone dulcimer, but I want it out of really beautiful rosewood and spruce, wonderful spruce that he had. And then I had taken photographs of the cliffs and also up in Idlewild, up in the mountains in Pine Grove. So I had Larry Robinson inlay the cliffs. And it's really beautiful. And if you turn this in the light, the ocean kind of moves. It's kind of cool. And then this is one of my favorite spots when I go hiking in Idlewild. And when the instrument came, I was able to finish the piece, and I call it the Dulcimer Suite. This is my butterfly dulcimer that was built for me by Joellen Lapidus. And the reason it's called a butterfly is because Joellen builds themed type dulcimers. There are no two that look alike. And I was telling Joellen about how I'd come through a dark night of the soul kind of a period, and I merged sort of like a metamorphosis into this kind of butterfly life here in California. So she did the inlays of the butterflies, and here on the peg head, she did that beautiful inlay. And it's made of rosewood and spruce, and it's a 6-string with a double bass and a double melody, which I tuned a fifth apart. And the cool thing about Joellen is she built Joni Mitchell's very first dulcimer, which inspired Joni to write 4 songs on it for an iconic album called Blue. She wrote California, A Case of You, All I Want, and Carrie. So thank you, Joellen, for getting Joni into the dulcimer. And it has a nice full sound because of the spruce and the rosewood and the strings that are tuned a fifth apart. So something like Summer Over the Rainbow is... And I think this is the 41st dulcimer she built. She hasn't built a lot of them, but each one of them is a unique piece of art. And it's kind of cool to have a little Lapidus in my homies. So this is Bosco, and he's the love of my life, of course, and he's a miniature dachshund, aren't you, sweetie? And he often kind of sits on my lap when we travel around. And one day I was looking down and I thought, you know, you're about the length of a dulcimer. And I got to wondering, I wonder if someone can build a dulcimer that kind of looks like Bosco. So it took me about almost a year, and I discovered this guy named Peter Luce, who had built these sculptures of animals and put a dulcimer fretboard on them. And I contacted him and sent him a whole bunch of pictures of Bosco. And lo and behold, here is my Bosco dulcimer. And it's kind of cool. Peter's a self-taught artist, and these are like peanuts, and I think there's some wood in here and some cardboard. I'm not quite sure, but it sounds really good. And it's so much fun to play, you know. My little love song for you. Come, sweet darling, sit down beside me. I love looking in those eyes. They're big and round and sweet-colored chocolate brown. Our love was a sweet surprise. Oh, some people say I'm crazy. Maybe who knows? All I know is I love you, baby, and I'm glad that it shows. Angels show up in unusual ways. We fell in love and carried my heart away. Some things are meant to be, like me for you, you for me. Love, it always finds a way. We're a song that must be sung. Our harmonies, they blend as one. You lighten up the darkest days. Oh, some people say I'm crazy. Maybe who knows? All I know is I love you, baby, and I'm glad that it shows. angels show up in unusual ways. We fell in love and you carried my heart away. When I met you, I was feeling blue. Life is a lonely ride. You know it's darkest before the dawn. Sometimes life takes so long, but I've got an angel by my side. Oh, some people say I'm crazy. Maybe who knows? All I know is I love you, baby, and I'm glad that it shows. Angels show up in unusual ways. We fell in love and you carried my heart away. So if you haven't guessed already, that was a love song I wrote for Bosco. And I recorded it, and I know of a couple that wrote for permission to get married to it. They didn't know it was about my dog, but hey, love is love. So this little cutie is called a baritone dulcimet, and it was built by a friend of mine who I've known since the early 70s, Ron Ewing. He's a great player and builder. And one of the things that people don't know about Ron is that he was the one that came up with this shape of half an hourglass and half a teardrop, which are really the two main shapes that people usually build dulcimers out of. But he came up with this design. He also came up with the 1.5 fret. And what that does is it gives you a minor, so you don't have to retune into a minor tuning to play songs. So those are the two main innovations from Ron. He's not much of a bragger, so I'm bragging for him. One of my favorite songs on this is a song by Jacques Brel called Marika. And one of the reasons it sounds so beautiful on this particular instrument is because it's made of walnut, but the top is a very, very old spruce that gives it a very mellow quality. So here's Marika. So one Sunday I was scrolling through some of the Dulcimer Facebook sites, and I saw a picture of a really beautiful, different looking Dulcimer. It was built by a guy named Terry McDowell, and I tracked him down and I asked him if he would build me a Dulcimer. And he said he'd be happy to, but he wants to build a Dulcimer that he wants to build as an art piece, and if I like it, I can buy it, and if not, that would be okay. So I agreed to it. He did tell me that he kind of wanted to come up with this kind of a shape and the kind of woods he was thinking of using. So let me show you this, because this is so unusual. This here in the strum hollow, I think, is a leaf pattern. This is all handmade. And by the way, he lived in a Winnebago, so at the time he was making this. So this was built either inside the Winnebago or outside, or both, I'm not sure. But it wasn't like a big wood shop. So that's his leaf design. And then up here, he came out with some different sound holes. I think this is a snake, I'm not sure. But I know this other one here are birds, because this Dulcimer was based on a song he liked by Nina Simone called "And I'm Feeling Good, Birds Flying High, You Know How I Feel." And then up here is, of course, a butterfly. And then this is some sort of, I think, a peace symbol. I'm not sure. But it gets even more interesting because he put all these things inside the peg head. Usually people just carve it out and leave it blank, but there are all kinds of like little groove and little kind of buttons and funky little things in there. I wondered what they were when he sent me pictures. I said, is it a nest? Is it a bird's nest? What is it? And then on the side here, he did similar stuff. You can see like little, kind of like little jewelry pieces that he kind of glued in there. We talk about out of the box, you know? And so when he finished it, I said, you should call it like an artsimer. And he said, it's called Nina. And I said, Nina? Like Nina Simone? And he said, yeah, it's based on Nina Simone. And he had no idea that I was a huge Nina Simone fan. So he sent it to me, and it's just beautiful. Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun up in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new day, it's a new dawn, and I'm feeling good. I never played that before on here, but that's the song. So if this wasn't really beautiful enough, he sends it, and it arrives in this box. Let me show you this box. So he painted birds on the box. People usually send me dulcimers in dulcimer cases or in bags or something, wrapped securely. But it came like this, which is really an art piece in itself. And when I opened it up and I took the dulcimer out, there was like a painting he had done of Nina Simone, and it felt like it was sort of like a tomb. And it was the coolest thing. So I kept the case. It's not really a case that you can kind of carry the dulcimer around in, but it's really one big art project. And I think this was the very last dulcimer he built. I did ask him if he would build another, and he said no, that he was just into other things. And Terry's a really interesting guy. He doesn't like to talk on the phone, and he does drawings and all kinds of things. He's a little mysterious, but this is just, I just love Nina, and I love playing it, and it's just really a great dulcimer. I listen to a lot of jazz and blues and classical music, but it's very difficult to play it on a regular dulcimer because I don't have all the notes. I needed a chromatic dulcimer. So one day I saw a beautiful dulcimer made by a guy named John Calkin, and he had built it for his wife. And I called him up and I asked him, could he build me a bass chromatic dulcimer? And he said yes. He's a luthier, he does guitars, and he used to be editor of Guitar Magazine. So this is the dulcimer he came up with. This is made of beechwood, real pretty, and walnut, and I'll show you the back of it. It's got this design, which is really beautiful. And then he follows through up on the peg head with the same design idea. And I'll give you a short sample of one of my favorite jazz songs I learned from Carmen McRae called Black Coffee, and you'll hear what a little bass chromatic dulcimer sounds like. I'm feeling mighty lonesome, I haven't slept a wink. I walk the floor and watch the door, in between a drink, black coffee. Love's a hand-me-down brew. I'll never know a Sunday in this weekday room. Well, I'm talking to the shadows, 1 o'clock till 4. And Lord, how slow the moments go when all I do is pour black coffee. Since the blues caught my eye, I'm hanging out on Monday, my Sunday dreams to dry. That kind of stuff. So my next musical venture on this is to learn how to play Thelonious Monk and Miles Davis. That should be a feat. So for those of you looking for more of a mystical cosmic experience, this is the dulcimer built by my friend Robert Worth. It's called a cosmic dulcimer. And if you look at the sound holes, you can imagine why. You've got the sun and stars and Saturn and moons and all kinds of things. And he makes these out of different woods. I like really colorful woods. So I'll show you the back of them. It's really pretty. And you can plug these in and put them through sound effects if you want. But when I got the dulcimer, there was something wrong with the bass string. So I took it to the guy who does my repairs, and he finished it and left it for me on a Friday afternoon. And I picked it up, and when I got it home, the bass string sounded worse. It sounded like... And I thought, well, this is horrible. Now I gotta wait till Monday to play this thing. But then as I was fooling around with it, I thought, it sounds like a sitar. So on Monday, I took it back, and I said, is there any way you can screw up the other strings to sound like the bass string? So he made this little tiny wooden, I think it's walnut, thing that fits underneath the strings and up against the bridge. I think I have it on the right way. There's a round part, though, and there's a straight part. So you got to get it right. There we go. And now they sound like this. Like a sitar. So on an evening when I just kind of want to chill out, I can play this kind of like dulcy sitar thing, or take it out and play it like a regular dulcimer. And with a glass of a Cabernet and a California Doobie, I have a little stoner experience. And the thing I really like about Robert's dulcimers is they're not $3,000 to $5,000 instruments, high end, everything is perfect. They're homemade. He makes them in the back of his house, but they've got a lot of soul to them. And he's one of these really creative guys that builds all kinds of things, and he's not afraid to try things. He's actually helping me build a guru dulcimer. It's a dulcimer in the shape of a guru that I'm going to paint the guru on. And he's going to have arms, and I'm going to strum in his belly area for good karma. Well, that's a whole nother video, but for now it's the cosmic dulcimer. So this is my favorite coffee place, Coffee and Plants, here in Ocean Beach, and I come here just about every day after Bosco and I walk the cliffs. I get a macchiato, and Bosco loves the little foam from the coffee. And I bring my winged dulcimer, sort of noodle around and see what the muse brings. This is the instrument I created for Dulcimeditation that the Dulcimer shop builds for me. And last night I was thinking about this poem that the 13th century poet Rumi wrote about peace, and he actually mentions the dulcimer. I wanted to read it to you. He's a great Sufi poet. It says, "Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and frightened. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Take down the dulcimer. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground." So I think the dulcimer was a hammer dulcimer, but as they say, close enough for folk music. Cheers.